This pattern dropped in 2020 and it's almost 2026 and I'm still reaching for it. Hey Stitches, it's your girl Kris. Welcome on into the channel if this is the first time that you're finding one of my videos. Welcome back to the channel if you happen to be an OG. Now for today's video, I am going to be spilling the tea on another oldie but goodie sewing pattern. Now it might have been last week, it might have been the week before. I shared with you guys the Friday Pattern Company Patina Blouse, a pattern that I think entered the chat sometime in 2023 and is still pretty relevant in my wardrobe. This one is even older. It is another Friday Pattern Company pattern. I didn't really plan it this way, it just kind of happened. But this one is the Sagebrush top. Now the Sagebrush top was released all the way back in 2020. It almost feels strange to be referring to 2020 as a long time ago. But you guys, it's almost 2026. So that is almost 6 years ago that this pattern was released. Now I remember way back when I made up my first iteration of this pattern using a black and white, I think it might have been a poplin fabric that I had gotten from Mood. And I royally messed up the construction. I was able to fix it in the end, but you guys, I don't know what happened. I had gathered in my back yoke piece, not my back yoke, my back bodice piece. I had gathered it at the side seam instead of across like the area where it would connect to my yoke. So I put it on and I was wondering, well, what is wrong with my blouse? It looks kind of funny. And when I double checked it, I had the arm side hanging down at my side seam. I almost didn't fix it. That one almost ended up in my work in progress pile, but I knew if I'd gotten there, it would probably never see the light of day again. And I had a small piece of fabric left back over, thank God I did, because I needed to recut my back yoke main and the back bodice because I had attached it, as I said, and I had graded my seams, had lost all of my seam allowance. I don't know what happened. I really don't. Now, when I had finally finished my blouse, I loved it. I loved everything about it. Now, you already know that black and white is my jam. I loved this print. It was kind of giving off an animal print vibe. It had like, I guess it was like abstract type of squares or something on the fabric, but when you looked at it from a distance, that is the kind of effect that it was giving me. And I wore that Sagebrush top until I got makeup around the collar, and notwithstanding, I washed it and washed it and washed it, I just couldn't get it out. Now, sometime after, my friend Lynn from LWS Trims or Lynn Wardrobe Sews or Sewn Adaptive, whichever one you know her by, she had suggested to me to use something called, I think, Fell's Napper. I was not able to get my hands on it at the time. And I ended up, I think, just giving away my blouse. Did I give it away or did I chuck it away? I might have given it away thinking that maybe somebody else would have better luck in getting my makeup stains out. I couldn't put bleach on it because of the black included in the black and white print. Long story short, I don't have that one anymore. Now, my second iteration, I actually made it as part of the Minerva Ambassador team. It was a kit from Minerva. I loved it. This one was in a multicolored print, and I think I still have it in my wardrobe. Now, I am a Minerva ambassador in case you don't know. And if you wanted to grab like any fabrics or kits from Minerva, Christmas is right around the corner. You might be looking to gift yourself, or maybe there is another sewist in your life that you would like to get something for Christmas. Then if you're going to shop from Minerva anyway, then consider using my Minerva code. I'll just pop it in here on the screen and get shopping, you guys. If you're going to be doing it anyway, why not support me in the process? Now, that was iteration number 2. Now, fast forward yet again to a couple weeks ago. I wanted something to sew, but I wanted something to sew that I had sewn before. I wasn't really in the mood to have to trace off a new pattern and then mess about with my fitting adjustments, because if you have been here for any time, then you know I am pretty anal when it comes to making fit adjustments. almost never do I take a pattern right out of the envelope and sew it up. That has never worked for my body in the past. I have no reason to think it's going to work for my body now or in the future. And so I always take the time to adjust my pattern pieces. But I really didn't feel like that extra work a couple weeks ago. I was just getting back into the groove of sewing, having not sat at my machine for a good like 5 or 6 weeks. And when I was going through my patterns, my eyes landed on the Sagebrush top. A fabric immediately came to mind, and bam, this beauty was born. When I say this beauty, I mean this top that I'm wearing in today's video. Now, I picked up this fabric. It might have been, was it this year or was it last year? On one of my trips to Barbados, I have done a fabric haul on every single Barbados trip in the last like 2 years. Don't judge me, you guys. I am a sucker for good fabric. I don't have any fabric stores to me locally, and it means that whenever I want to sew, I inevitably have to shop my own stash. And so I have curated a good collection of fabrics, and this one was included. Now, I actually have this one in 2 colorways. The first one is probably quite similar. I can't even remember right now. And then there was this one. I got 2 yards of this fabric. I knew I wanted to make some type of blouse with it when I added it to my stash, and a blouse it became. So I was telling you about this project. I decided that a good way to get my sewjo back would be to go live and sew up an item. And I did that, I think, 2 or 3 consecutive days with different patterns, of course. And on this particular day, I sat down to sew up my Sagebrush top in front of a live audience. If you missed it and you want to see what happened, I'll drop the link in right here. And what do you know? I mucked it up right off the bat, you guys. I had gathered in this gathered ruffle right here. It might be a little bit difficult to see because of the busyness of this print. It kind of gets lost a little bit. I know it's here. I love how subtle it is, but I gathered it in to my front bodice piece. And then I was wondering why my front bodice piece was not fitting my front yoke piece. I almost thought I made a cutting error, and I pulled for my instructions, and what do you know? I was meant to gather my front bodice piece and to attach the ruffle piece to my front yoke instead of to the front main. Now, I could have avoided that mistake if I had simply sat down and read my instructions. I'm pretty sure that this probably happened to me the last time I made this blouse as well, because I'm a sucker when it comes to not reading pattern instructions. I don't know why I think I'm such a bright spark that I can figure it out in my own mind when the work has already been done for me. It has been reduced into writing or into print. I just need to take the time to read it. And I wish I did, but I didn't. So there I sat on my live with my unpicker, unpicking the gathering, because I thought I could probably gather my front bodice now, but then my gathering would be uneven. It would be a little bit too condensed in the middle of my blouse and too sparse towards the edges. My live audience agreed, and so I unpicked it and did it the right way. Once I had gotten that sorted, sewing up this blouse was a breeze. It didn't take me very long at all, I don't think. The most time-consuming part was probably cutting and preparing the self-bias binding. Now, that is the one difficulty, I guess, in this pattern, and that is preparing the bias binding and actually stitching it on. If you have zero sewing experience, the rest of this blouse is, I think, fairly doable. But the bias binding is a little bit tricky. You have to try and keep it even so that when you go in to top stitch your binding in place, you don't end up with like gaps in your binding. And you're not just top stitching it around the neckline. There are these long strings in the back right here, and you have to top stitch all the way to the end of those strings. Now, I'm pretty sure that on at least one of my iterations, I had done a self yoke and finished off the neckline using that yoke, and then done the ties and sort of sandwiched them in this little split here in the back instead of finishing it off with the binding. I am minded to do that sometime again in the future, but this time I just thought that this print would go nicely in the bias binding, and I had just enough fabric to squeeze it out. And if I hadn't done the bias binding, I would have been left with a probably unusable piece of fabric anyway. So I just went ahead, bit the bullet and did it. Now, all things considering, I'm getting so much better and so much quicker at both prepping and sewing my bias binding. That was not always the case. I used to find it pretty frustrating, but I have kind of come up with some tips that kind of eases the strain of applying bias necklines. Now, I did do a video, maybe it was earlier this year, maybe it was last year. I can't quite remember the time right now, but it was when I was a Love Notions ambassador, and I had shared 5 tips on how to apply bias binding. I'll go ahead and see if I can find that video. If I can, then I'll link it right here. So just in case you need a little bit of extra hand holding when it comes to bias bindings, you might find that one quite useful. Now, aside from the bias binding, the rest of it was easygoings in my view. I did do the sleeves, and I actually tried it on for my Instagram community without the elastic casing in my sleeves. I got a couple DMs actually talking about how nice the blouse looked without the elastic in the sleeve. I contemplated leaving it as is after getting that feedback, but then when I was reviewing my footage, I realized that I think it was the front of my sleeve was longer than the back of my sleeve. And that is because of the way the sleeve was drafted. It is drafted to be a puff sleeve, and to create that volume, it meant that the sleeve was longer so that when you do the casing and you put your elastic in, you can kind of pull it up your arm and give off this puffed effect. Now, I guess it's not as puffy as it could be if I used a different type of fabric, but I think you guys can still get the gist. I think I prefer it, honestly speaking, with the elastic. Maybe if the sleeve had been drafted differently and it was even right the way around, maybe I might have gravitated to it a little bit more. But for me, I think I like this puffed sleeve. Now, I know back in the day when everybody was sewing up this pattern, because it was one of Friday Pattern Company's popular patterns, I'm not sure how they ranked it. I guess maybe Friday Pattern Company has some idea of what their best-selling patterns are. But from the outside looking in, this definitely seems to be one of those patterns. Now, a couple of people were a little bit reserved about making it, especially those who were pretty well endowed in terms of the boob area. But I have gone through this hashtag on Instagram, and it looks great on a variety of body types and proportions. Whether you are somebody who has bigger boobs, or like me, has smaller boobs, maybe you have broader shoulders or narrow shoulders, whatever it is, in my view, something about this pattern seems to be a little bit magical because it looks great on so many people. So if you have been hesitating to sew it up, I would encourage you, go ahead and see what it looks like on other bodies. Now that Instagram's algorithm keeps changing, it's not as easy to go through the entire hashtag as it used to be. And that is a big when it comes to Instagram. I much preferred it back then because as sewists, it's always good for me, and probably for a lot of you, to see how a pattern looks on other people. That can help you decide whether you might want to invest a coin in buying the pattern and then the time and the fabric in sewing it up for yourself. So Instagram, if you're watching this, bring it back. We loved it. Now, in terms of the sizing, this is a size inclusive pattern. It comes in an extra small up to a 7XL. That is the standard Friday Pattern Company sizing. And that is a bust of, I think, 32 inches, a hip of 34 inches, up to a bust of, I think, 60 or 63 inches, and a hip of 63 inches. So very, very size inclusive from the smaller end right the way up to larger sizes. In terms of the construction, I think that this is suitable for an advanced beginner. Once you have an idea of how to top stitch items, because you are gonna have to finagle, as I said, with that bias binding, you should be okay, I think. I probably wouldn't recommend this to a really newbie sewist, just because you might find it frustrating to get your binding to sit nicely. But that being said, do what you like. When I started sewing, I defied all the odds, I started with a self-drafted dress, which by the way looked amazing from the outside, a little bit rough around the edges on the inside. But looking back, I could never ever be the type of person who started sewing, making things like pillowcases. That might work for you. There's no shame in that game at all. But I knew myself and I know the type of personality that I have. I need to challenge myself always. And so I just dive straight into the deep end. So if you're somebody like me, then go ahead, shoot your shot at this pattern. What is the worst that could happen? You mess it up, it ends up in the work in project pile. And so what? Start again. Or look for a different pattern, pull it out, and keep going. Now, in terms of rating this top, I'm going to go ahead and give my top a big old 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10, period. I love it. I love my fabric choice. I love the bias binding. It's sewn really, really neatly. It's finished on the inside. It fits great. That might be because I did take the time to do some fitting adjustments. Duh. And I love it. I really, really do. Now, in terms of the sizing, I don't think I told you guys what my size was. I did a size large in this top throughout the entire thing, I think. Now, I do have narrower shoulders, so I chose my pattern size based on my high bust measurement, and then I went in and did a 1/2 inch full bust adjustment. Now, you might want to argue with me, oh, it's a loosey-goosey top anyway. Why take the time to do a full bust adjustment? And the answer is this. If I had not, notwithstanding that my cup size is only one size bigger than what this pattern is drafted for, it is drafted for a B cup, I am a C cup, the likelihood is the front of my blouse, like all the way down here, would pull up like this and then get longer in the back. And I hate that. I hate that. It makes your top look very unbalanced in my view. And that is because the mound of tissue, which is your bust, is going to take up additional length the bigger your girls are. So if I happened to be a D or a double D or an E sewing cup, then this high cup in the front would be even more dramatic. Now, if that doesn't bother you, again, do what suits you best. But for me, it is a big deal. I don't like it, and so I'm going to take the time almost every single time to do a full bust adjustment. Now, contrary to popular belief, blending out at the side seams only can do so much because a full bust adjustment adds width to accommodate the circumference of the girls, and it also adds length to go over the extra mounds of flesh that are your girls. And a full bust adjustment addresses both of these things. If you only go ahead and blend out your sides without adding any length to your blouse or to your dress, then inevitably you are going to get a hiking in the center front of your blouse or your dress, even if you don't end up squished like this with pancake boobs. But again, to each his or her own. Now, in addition to a full bust adjustment, I also went ahead and did a 1/4 inch forward shoulder adjustment in the traditional way. My first 2 iterations, I had removed a 1/4 inch in length in my front bodice piece only and had done nothing at all to my back yoke pieces. Now, this is not the traditional way to do a forward shoulder adjustment, but I have found in the past it has worked wonders for me in several of my patterns. More recently, I don't know if my posture has changed again or if it only applies to certain patterns. I have found that for this one, adding in that additional 1/4 inch to my back yoke piece that I had taken from my front yoke piece has made quite a difference in terms of how my blouse feels on me. The first 2 times it fit well, but this time it fits even better. Now you can go ahead if you have forward rotated shoulders like I do and play around with both of these alterations. Try removing from the front only, leaving the back as is, and see if you have enough room at your arm side. If you don't, then you might need to go in and add back in that additional length at your back yoke or your back bodice piece just to balance back out your arm side. Now, because I had made that adjustment to the bodice pieces, I did have to make the same adjustment to my sleeve pieces so that my sleeve would feel odd and feel like it's twisting in my arm side. It fits perfectly in my opinion now that I have made those adjustments. Now, the last thing that I didn't adjust the pattern piece, but I did end up doing a 3-inch hem instead of doing a 4-inch hem. Now, this pattern is designed to have a 2-inch hem folded up on itself, giving a total of 4 inches. I decided that because I am a little bit taller, not a little bit, quite a bit taller than what the pattern is drafted for. It is drafted for a 5'5" person. I am 5'8.5". I didn't add any additional length to my pattern pieces, and I just decided I could just go with a 3-inch hem instead of a 4-inch hem. Now, for me, looking at the finished length of my blouse, let me step back so you can see, I probably could have done another inch and it would have been fine. Because I am quite short-waisted, I usually have to raise my waistline by a 1/2 inch, but because of the shape of this blouse, I didn't bother to do that either. And so I probably could have gone up and done the hem at 4 inches, but that doesn't bother me none at all. Now, one thing I forgot to mention, I did do a 1/4 inch sway back adjustment on my back bodice piece only, because otherwise I would have a pooling of fabric at my center back. It's probably not a big deal to a lot of people, but again, if I'm going to take the time to do the adjustments, I may as well do all the adjustments that I think are appropriate for my body. Now, don't get me wrong, even though I'm really into adjusting patterns, I don't always get all the adjustments right. Sometimes I have to tweak a pattern after I have made it up and have actually worn it around to see how it feels on my body throughout an entire day. And as I said, in this case, I did go back in and make one additional tweak to my pattern. Now, in terms of wearability, I feel like I could wear this blouse anywhere. I could wear it to the office as I have today with a pencil skirt. I could wear this one with jeans. I could wear this one with slacks. It really just depends on what vibe I'm going for. And I really love patterns that I can get serious bang for my buck. That was also not always the case. I used to be a one and done type of sewist. I would do a pattern, make the adjustments to said pattern, sew it up, bam, done, move on. Very rarely did I find myself repeating patterns, but the more settled I have become in my sewing journey, the more I am gravitating towards patterns that I have made that I like and that fit me well. Because I started thinking, why have I spent all of this money on patterns, then all of this time to trace out and adjust set patterns, only to sew it up one time and never again? That doesn't make much sense. I wish I had thought about this earlier on in my sewing journey. Maybe then my pattern stash would not be as overwhelming as it is now. But I guess better late than never. Now, that is all the tea I needed to spill with you guys on the Sagebrush top by Friday Pattern Company. I absolutely feel like if you have never checked it out, you should at least go ahead and have a peek at it. If they're having any sales for Black Friday or for Christmas or anything like that, you can probably save yourself a couple of bucks. I'm not affiliated with Friday Pattern Company in any way, but I really do like most of their patterns. The only one that didn't work as well for me was a Wilder gown, and it was really user error more than anything else. But then that kind of turned me off that pattern. Now, if you want to hear more about some other patterns that I'm never ever going to sew up again, I have shared a video here on the channel quite recently. I'll pop it in right here. And then I did a sequel to that video. And in the sequel, I shared 7 patterns that my sewing friends never want to touch again with a long spoon. I thought it was hilarious, but you can be the judge. If you missed it, then make sure you hop, skip, and jump over to this video and check that one out. The Wilder gown did feature in that one. Now, if you enjoyed today's video, then be sure to go ahead and give your girl a thumbs up. Drop me a comment down below and let me know, what do you think of my finished Sagebrush top? Have you made it yourself? If you haven't, do you already own the pattern? Or having heard my review, are you now considering adding this oldie but goodie pattern to your stash? As usual, if you have gotten to this point in today's video and you're not a subscriber, then please do consider joining my YouTube sewing family. I really enjoy having you guys here. I enjoy the discourse we have in the comment section, and I am really grateful that you have taken the time out to watch this video and also to become a subscriber to all of my videos so that whenever they drop, you are right up front checking them out. That is everything I needed to share with you guys today. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, stay calm, stay cool, stay safe, and absolutely keep sewing. Peace.